A Plaguelands Media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media and Rio, who doesn't want to be in the video apparently. Okay. Bringing you another book review, taking some time from this busy grading period at the end of the semester. So cheers to that. And I'm pretty excited about this one. This was a book that I was actually looking forward to. That is The Informers by Bret, Easton, Ellis, of course, the author behind such classics as American Psycho, Less Than Zero, Imperial Bedrooms. Now, this book came out in 1994, I believe, and it's mainly set in the early 80s, his kind of starlight period, if you will. Now, what was interesting about The Informers, which I actually didn't realize, this is a collection of short stories. I believe there are 14 in total, 13 in total in this book. But what's unusual is that the stories themselves, the characters are all interwoven. So the narrator of one story might be a side character in the next story, and you might get glimpses of characters here and there weaving throughout this whole kind of extended narrative, so to speak. And because of that, I'm not actually going to do my regular short story thing where I break down and discuss every story in the book. It's just going to be basically way too confusing for all of you. And I think it would do everything in this book a disservice to do it that way. What I am going to do, however, is talk very briefly about the 4 stories in this book that really stuck with me and that really kind of got to me. Now, in typical Bret Easton Ellis style, this book is about apathy, it's about nihilism, it's about characters that have either given up, that don't care, that go through life not really living, so to speak. And in that way, some people might find it very depressing. Having read a lot of Bret Easton Ellis's work, however, it was to be expected for me. I very much enjoyed every story in this book. I don't think there was one story that was boring for me. I don't think there was one story where the writing style flagged in any way, shape, or form. I think this is a fantastic collection and really emblematic of Bret Easton Ellis's not only writing style, but ability to develop characters, especially when it's a short story. In his other works, you know, you get a long time to see the arcs that these characters go through. And in these short stories, you get it in a very short time. Granted, the arc goes from story to story for a lot of the characters in these books, in this book, but you get a fantastic sense of Bret Easton Ellis's grasp of dialogue, his grasp of the time period in which this is set, the idea that as you're reading this, the LA of the early 80s is really kind of coming alive. Hey Bella Bear, do you want to be on camera? Okay, let's try and get our other cat in this video. Come here, mate. Hey, there we go. Let go, Daddy. You want to say hi to all your kitty fans out there? You want to say hi? Oh, you're not too happy about being on camera, are you? Okay. Okay. There you go. He just wants his blankie, that's all. So, as I said, I am going to talk about the 4 stories in this collection that stuck with me, that moved me, that made me stop and think. And that's another thing about this. After every story, you need to put this book down and you need to take a little bit of time to just digest what you read. It's been a long time since I've read a short story collection that's made me do that. It's been a long time since I read a short story collection where you kind of feel for these characters, even though they're all rich dicks. And that's the LA that he is kind of showcasing and highlighting here. So, you know what? I've been talking too long. The cats are getting a little antsy. Washing machine's going on in the background. So I'm just going to take another drink because that's what they would have done back in the day. And just get right into the next episode of...
Read a fucking book. 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 People.
So the first story I want to talk about is called Letters from LA. Now, this is epistolary fiction at its absolute finest. Now, I was not a huge fan of this style of fiction, epistolary fiction, of course, being letter writing, until I was at university and one of my professors who actually helped me with my honours thesis suggested that style of writing for the novella I wrote as part of that honours thesis, which I actually did it with emails. This, because it's set in the early 80s, this is letters. The whole purpose of this is, or the whole point I should say, is a girl called Anne has left university and gone to stay with her grandparents for a semester. She hasn't dropped out, but she has gone to LA to stay with her grandparents who are rich. I believe her grandfather owns a studio. It's implied it's a movie studio, or he runs it, I should say. And she's writing these letters back to a guy from the university that she went to called Sean, who she is infatuated with, but from the tone of the letters, he really didn't like her back. There was some hostility there, judging by what Anne writes. So the letters kind of start out with Anne describing her life in LA and asking Sean what she did wrong or why he isn't writing back to her. Every one of these letters is, "Dear Sean, love Anne." As the letters progress, Anne starts to talk about her life in LA, meeting celebrities, meeting producers. She's working at the studio, reading scripts, but most of her time is spent, by the pool or on the beach or down in Palm Springs or whatever they're doing. And we get this idea that LA is changing her. At first, she was only going to stay for a short time. By the end of this story, this is her life now. She meets a movie producer called Randy who reads some of her writing and kind of critiques it, and then she starts to slowly get better, but Randy is suicidal, and ultimately he's either murdered or he takes his own life. It's very ambiguous at the end because quite frankly, even though she spends a lot of these letters talking about how close her and Randy is, by the end of everything, she just doesn't fucking care that Randy has died. It's just a thing that happens in the day-to-day of Los Angeles. And it's really a gut-wrenching story of how a place, which I think is what Bret Easton Ellis is trying to say, how a place can completely change a person, and not for the better. She doesn't come out of this story better than she started. She was innocent and in love, and then it's the drugs and the parties and the lifestyle and the people that she is with that I don't want to say corrupt, because it's ultimately her choice. But she does fall into this spiral where she becomes just as apathetic as everyone else around her in the city. It is truly one of the best short stories I've read in a long, long time. That's Letters from LA. The next story is The Secrets of Summer. Okay? And yes, I dog-ear the pages of my paperback novels. I don't do it to my hardcovers. That's just rude. This was very odd, very, very strange. The narrator of this story believes that he is in fact a vampire, and his circle of friends all believe they're vampires. So he picks up women, he sleeps with them, he drinks their blood, he sleeps in a coffin. And what's interesting is the characters in this story, the narrator, I believe his name is Jamie, and there's Raymond, I think, as well. They're referenced by other characters in other stories, and other characters in other stories bring up this idea that there are vampires in LA. Tonally, it's very different to anything else that is in the collection, but it works. And it works because we're getting like this first-person perspective of a guy who genuinely believes he's a vampire, and one of his friends has gone missing. They find a a baseball bat that's been kind of sharpened into a stake in the bottom of a pool with ash all around. There's garlic on it. They think that their friend has been killed. So it becomes this whole murder thing. It's really hard to describe it or to pigeonhole it within the confines of the collection, and I think that's why I enjoyed it so much, because it just stood out as so different from the other stories. Whether or not he is a vampire, it's alluded to, but we're getting his perspective, and he could be an unreliable narrator in this case. He sees a psychiatrist at the end of the story, whom he basically threatens, but it seems like the psychiatrist has heard all of his shit before. It's really interesting, and I'm sure more could be done with it, and I think it is a fantastic little glimpse into just how twisted Bret Easton Ellis can create these characters, can shape them and mold them into something that we're not actually expecting as the reader. So it is a vampire story with a twist. Really, really good. I really enjoyed it. The fifth wheel here. This is about a guy who is kind of coerced into letting an acquaintance stay with him. He and this acquaintance, this man named Peter, a few years ago, started a fire that got out of control. Peter fled. This guy's life is kind of going nowhere. He works in a car wash. Peter comes back with this drug addict woman called Mary, and he needs to stay for a little while. This guy doesn't want him there, but Peter kind of forces his way in. While the guy's at work one day, Peter and Mary kidnap a kid because Peter needs money to pay off someone. We never quite know exactly who or why. This quickly spirals and it gets completely out of control when people come looking for money, or a guy comes looking for money, I should say. And Mary tells the narrator of the story about the time Peter caught her having sex with another guy and took the guy out into the desert and basically murdered him by shooting him in the eye. This culminates in the kid that they kidnapped. Peter was debating, do we ransom him to the parents or do we sell him to some people that think they're vampires? So you get a vampire kind of tie-in again, which I thought was really, really great. The narrator finds out that Peter has basically been sodomizing this kid while he's been at work at the car wash. And Peter, who acts dumb, really isn't. He's the one that's in control of everything. So you don't know if it's a split personality thing or what's going on, but that's kind of the hint you get. And ultimately, the guy telling the story has to kill the kid, and they end up fleeing and heading back to Las Vegas. This was a great example of how all it takes is one person in your life to fuck everything up so quickly. The narrator is just trying to do his best. He's just trying to live. He's got a job. He's got a house. And it takes this one fuckwit to basically bring everything crashing down. And then you get this idea at the end. They're driving into the desert, and that was where Peter killed the guy that Mary spoke about. So there is this underlying kind of idea that the narrator himself realizes that he too is about to be killed. Really chilling stuff. Really chilling. The final story I want to talk about is called On the Beach. This was a hard one for me. So the narrator of this story is basically with a girl, maybe 19, 20 something girl that he's known since high school. It's assumed that they're a couple, that they went to prom together with this other guy. That's one thing Bret, Easton, Ellis does is, while sexuality is important in his stories, it's never a defining factor, which I really like. This girl is dying of cancer. And so this guy is staying with her. He spends his time on the beach with her while he basically watches her waste away with two other friends of theirs, this girl called Mona and whatever guy Mona happens to be sleeping with at the time. And he makes a decision to just leave because he doesn't want to be there anymore. And when Mona questions him about, like, do you love her? He says, no, I don't. He doesn't even know why he's there. He's basically there watching this woman die that he spent so much time with from high school onwards. And he's just sick of it. He doesn't want to be there anymore. So he just makes the decision to leave. This threw me, I have to admit, when I read it. Having experienced, I guess, this kind of thing, I really couldn't understand the mindset of the main character. However, when you put it in the context of a Bret Easton Ellis collection, it's so heartbreakingly well done that it stood out as one of the best stories in this collection. I'm going to say that Letters from LA was by far the standout story. That is not to say that the other stories in the collection aren't worth reading. There is not a bad story in this book. You get 13 short stories that showcase how fantastic of a writer Bret Easton Ellis is, and every one of them is worth a read, but you would be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't stop between each one and take time to think about what you just read. Think about not only the characters in the story, but anything in these stories that you connected with. Because that's the key with all of Bret Easton Ellis's work, is the connection that he manages to somehow create between you and the story itself. Even in American Psycho, there are points in American Psycho, which, by the way, is the only book that has ever made me physically vomit. There are points in that book where you can just sit back and relate and just go, fuck, yes. And when it comes to his work, that's actually really fucking scary. If you're sitting back going, I can relate to characters in a Bret Easton Ellis novel, then you've admitted to yourself that there's something fucking wrong up here. That's not a bad thing. At all. Trust me, it's not a bad thing. So, I'm going to leave it there. That's The Informers by Bret Easton Ellis, a fantastic short story collection, which I highly recommend to anybody. Even if this sort of book isn't your style, you will find something to enjoy in there. I guarantee. I guarantee. So I'm going to leave the video there, everyone. Please stay safe. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, hit the notification bell. Go check out my good friend Ian Van Gammet's other YouTube channel, which I will link in the description below. Go and have an 80s retro flashback fantasy. Take a drink. Read a fucking book, people.